So you started your dream business and now you're stuck. Well, in today's episode, you'll discover how this 6-step process can help you get unstuck in your business. Hello and welcome to the Radiant Business Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Ross, a web developer with over 11 years experience specializing in small and medium-sized business, high-conversion, SEO-friendly websites. Joining me as co-host is one of my team members, Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm part of Jason's team and also a business student, and I'm excited to be co-hosting today's episode.
And our guest today is Lee, who runs Guerilla Coaching, and where he specializes in helping small and medium enterprises with their business growth strategies, and has a six-step process that helps businesses get past their issues and their plateaus. So, introduce yourself. And
hey, Jason, Samantha, it's good to be here. I'm Lee Hodgins. I am a small to medium-sized business coach, as Jason mentioned, and I've got a few things to say today.
Yeah, for sure. So, as I mentioned before, you have your 6-step process that you work. So maybe start with introducing what those 6 steps are, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So most medium to small business enterprises begin with an entrepreneur. And so my expertise is working with the owners and founders of those businesses to help them scale to the next level once they've achieved a certain size or a certain volume, a certain success rate, I guess you say. There's a window of opportunity there where small to medium-sized business owners run into difficulties. I would say the two biggest problems three biggest problems for owners and founders are, number one, their mindset around how they operate either within the business or on the business. And two, it's also around the focus that they have in terms of their market and their ideal audiences. They tend to lose focus after a while, or they get focused on the wrong thing. And number three, their operational capabilities going into a scaling process. A lot of the time, they're not prepared as far as their business operations go in order to deal with the growth and the scaling that they want to do at that level. So my 6-step process begins with the owner mindset. That's the number one thing. So really sort of figuring out what they need to do in order to move past that entrepreneurial mindset that got them to where they're at. Because when you want to scale and grow an already successful business, it takes a different kind of skill set and a different kind of mindset, what I call, or what's often called, a CEO mindset. Yeah. The second thing is strategy. We look at strategy overall. This is where the focus part comes in. So whether or not you're focused on the right audience, the right marketplace, whether you've got the direct intention to grow in a certain area, certain niche maybe, we take a look at that. Number three is basically the goals that you set over what I call the 1 and the 3 year horizon. So what are your actual practical step-by-step actions that you're going to take in order to get you through the next year and then on to the 3 year horizon. The third area is what I call business process design. So that gets into the operational part of the business, how you're mapping out and actually documenting and then making sure you've got an accurate picture of all your key core business processes. So that includes everything If you're, say, in manufacturing, it includes your manufacturing processes, right down to the workflows of the organization. We take a look at that and make sure that you're set up for the success that you want in order to scale your business. The next one is people. So it's one of the biggest areas of problem when you start to scale as a business, is hiring the right people for the right positions at the right time. A lot of the time, business owners and founders find that this really holds them up a lot because they don't know how to hire properly. And so they end up putting the wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time. The next area is what we call the project management side of the business. So how you do work in the business, and then how you track and monitor the cost of that work, the labor that goes into that work, and the time that it takes to do that work. A lot of businesses, as they scale, kind of lose track of that, and so they start bleeding money out the back end, and so we want to prevent that. So those are them. I think that's 6, isn't it, Jason?
I think so. I kind of lost count partway through. So.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah, but anyways, that's, I would say, definitely the critical ones. And I could definitely speak to the issues that business owners can tend to run into when it comes to documenting your processes and then hiring people to fill those vacancies.
Yeah.
Because I spent years trying to fill vacancies in the sales role as I was looking to begin pushing my business out beyond a one-man show and start building up a sales team so I can focus on the parts of the business that my business I'm most passionate about, which is doing the projects and the technical side of it, of producing the websites for the clients.
Yep. Yep.
And that's how I joined the team.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's how you joined. Okay, cool.
And what was causing me a lot of the struggles is I did have a system created, but I didn't have it properly documented in a organized training system for my employees and staff that I was bringing in. And so they would get in there, get confused, not do anything, and then quit. So I was constantly going through this churn. And
Yikes.
so finally I got that whole process documented. And then now I've got 4 people on my team that have, longest serving of which is, this spring going to be going into his first full year on the team.
Cool. So yeah, cool. Right on.
And he's the first one that joined post producing that training system. So.
Yeah. One of the first things I do with my owner founder clients is I put them through a questionnaire that asks them some very simple questions about their role in the business. So what do they like to do in the business? What are they good at doing? And then what do they need to do that's critical to the business? If they can answer those questions clearly, then they probably are well on the way to being in the right place at the right time for themselves, first of all, and then they can figure out who they need in order to support them.
Is this questionnaire qualitative or quantitative as well?
It's both, but mostly qualitative, because what I find is that owners tend to sort of be stuck in, like I said, their mindset, right? So it's their attitudes, it's their belief systems, it's their values around how they started the business to begin with. And what ends up happening is they tend to cling to roles inside their business that they should no longer be doing. So one of the first things I do is, for example, if your business is creating widgets, my first question is, are you still in the back packing boxes of those widgets? Because if you are, you're probably in the wrong role in your business, especially if you want to scale it. Because scaling your business means that you got to be out working on the business development side of the business, not in the back, washing the bathrooms down or packing the boxes. And a lot of owners still are. Why? Because they like to do it. Or why? Because they feel like they're the only ones that can do it. Or why? Because, they've got, it's a default that they go back to. And so what ends up happening is they never get to the point where, or they find it very difficult to get to the point where they can actually let go of the tasks inside the business that are slowing them down from scaling.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, if a person is calling me as the technician type, then that's why I made the decisions, hold on to the technical roles in my business, and
absolutely,
on the sales roles, because I know that my passion for sales is the step I got to go through in order to get to doing the websites. So if that's the thing that I want to be doing, then I should be doing that and hiring someone like Samantha, who wants to be out there learning the sales side of things and building up that network and finding new projects.
Exactly, yeah. So you before you can hire people, you have to figure out what your most effective role is in the business and start to focus on that. Yeah. And I'll say quite honestly, for most business owners, it is the business development side of the business. It's getting out and being able to promote the business, being able to flesh out where the markets are, where the audience is for the business, and then being able to cultivate that, to nurture that. Now, in your case, because you're a technician, Jason, one of the things that a lot of technician owners struggle with is being able to get out and work on the business instead of actually working in the business. Yeah. So for you, it's really important that as a sort of a solopreneur that's on the cusp of scaling, perhaps, you've still got to be able to do that business development side of things. I mean, I'm a solopreneur myself, right? So I do this, I'm semi-retired, I do this just kind of on the side, but I still have to get out and do the business development part of it. So that's really important. If you don't do it, you've got to find somebody that can, right? Yeah. And that has to do it in a way that is effective for, how you want to grow the business.
Exactly. So,
it's all right. Maybe I can raise a couple of questions to Lee.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So on the note of the importance of hiring the right people at the right time, do you think that when you advise your clients on that, you make use of your experience and expertise in human resources? Because I see from your LinkedIn that you do have some credentials related to that. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's a good question for me. Thanks, Samantha. My background is 30 years plus in all kinds of businesses. I became known as an expert in growth and scaling from the operational human resource side of things. So yes, I came out of human resources. It was where I started my career a long, long time ago, back in the day. And as a result of that, I've literally hired, it's safe to say I've hired thousands of people throughout my career. I've gone all over the world to do that as well. I lived and worked in the Middle East for a number of years on big startup projects. I worked in the US, I worked in Canada, all over Canada. So, in my experience, I know a thing or two about hiring, definitely. I've planned out workforce plans for massive expansions, anywhere up to $1 billion, where we're hiring, hundreds of people onto a given expansion project. And for example, when I was in the Middle East, it was a $1.3 billion expansion project in oil and gas. that I was the human resources director on. So we hired over 500 people onto that project over 2 years. And we hired from 22, I believe, different countries.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. And by the way, it was during 9/11, like exactly right in the middle of 9/11. In fact, I got my boots on the ground in July of 2001, and then 9/11 happened in September. So I was only there a couple of months.
So, yeah, it was a very eventful time, because I was like in the middle of 9/11. It was also in the middle of Enron and WorldCom.
Oh yeah, and SARS was like the big, virus that was spreading all over the world at the time.
Yeah.
So needless to say, the plane flights that I took, nobody was on them.
Yeah.
I had all the seats to myself. Anyway, so we hired at a very, very difficult time for the Middle East, especially during that time. I was in a little country called Qatar. And so during that time, we had to go far and wide all over the world to find the people that we needed in order to make that startup happen. So it was definitely a challenge. Yes. And I learned a lot about hiring people from different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds. And we brought people from all over the world onto that project at a time when people were being divided. Worlds, civilizations were starting to sort of stake their place in the ground, and so we created a kind of a little mini bubble there on that project, where people who normally would have been, I would say, at odds with each other, even enemies in real life in their home countries, were actually working on the same project together in unison. So
Yeah.
Sounding like the development and the diversity and inclusion aspects of it were already part of what you were taking into consideration when hiring, and that was more than 2 decades ago, like before DEI hires were even talked about in the same manner as they are being talked about today.
yeah, I mean, DEI as a phrase wasn't even being used back then. It was still called diversity, just diversity. That's all it was called back then. And yes, you're right. So what we did was we intentionally, because we knew we needed to, because of the state of the world at the time, we knew we needed to create a situation on the ground with our project and with our startup that we had to create a culture, a special culture. And that took, it took a bit of us putting our heads together, and then me kind of leading the charge on it to create what we called the leadership culture of the time. So I developed, actually for that purpose, I developed a leadership training program that we put all of our first line, second line managers through, and our executive team through as well.
Yeah, and when you're having to source talent from that many diverse backgrounds like that, that becomes all the more important that you create a common culture that you can come together around.
That's exactly what we did. Yes, that's exactly what we did. So,
yeah, otherwise,
in fact,
you're just going to get fragmentation within the organization, and that's...
Well, not just that, but we just wouldn't have the kind of cohesion that we needed in order to build the project. So,
Yeah.
I was just speaking with one of my former colleagues from that time, not too long ago, maybe about 2-3 weeks ago. And we were wondering if our legacy was still surviving, because the project turned into a company basically that's still being run today. So I assume that it is, but you never know.
Yeah. So, and on that note, maybe we can talk a little bit more about, first of all, I guess on the note of hiring, what would be probably the biggest tip you could give someone, a business owner who's, looking to start filling vacancies and expanding their business out?
Don't hire your relatives.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. Like, stop it.
Yeah.
Most owners and founders reach for the people that are closest to them that they feel they can trust, so-called, and I'm using air quotes now, that they can trust, that they feel most comfortable with, that it's the easiest to do. So it's friends, family, oh yeah, my cousin has a guy that he knows, and so I'm just going to bring them on. Okay, what ends up happening is that just goes in a handbasket to where. Yeah. So what I do with my clients is I get them to step back from what I call bias hiring. Okay, so confirmation bias is a real thing, and it's a term that describes what you're looking for when you hire someone. Naturally, what you're looking for is someone who's like you, right? Who's most like you, who you feel closest to, who you feel you can, like I said, trust. And that's a confirmation bias. You're confirming a bias that you have within yourself. So,
and all you'll get out of that is a company full of yes men.
Well, it's not just that. You'll just get incompetent people.
Yeah,
you'll get people that are wrong for the role. You'll get people that you hire somebody to handle your invoicing, and they know nothing about it, or they said they know something about it, and it turns out they know very little about it. And so what ends up happening is that whole process is in jeopardy, and so you can't scale with that kind of incompetence. So you got to be able to hire to competence, first of all.
Yeah, in other words, hire to fill the gaps in your skill set first.
Yes, hire for the position, not for the person. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I do. I spend a lot of time working with the owner, basically walking them through the process of figuring out where they actually need the help inside the business. And that's in relation, as I said already, with what are you doing as the owner in the business? No, you shouldn't be packing boxes. Why are you packing boxes? Do you need to? There's probably no need for you to do that. And if there is, then maybe it's a critical process that you need to sort of lay out and map out and put into a formal sort of what I call a standard operating procedure, SOP. I don't call it that, it's called that. And then figure out, okay, are you the right person for doing this? If not, let's hire somebody that is actually the right person for doing that.
Is the business owner supposed to be the one creating the SOP in a very hands-on way, or do you recommend working with another party to develop these SOPs?
Yeah, it depends on sort of the background of the owner. Sometimes they're capable of doing it themselves, sometimes they're not. So depending on what the situation is, I'll make a recommendation that they either hire somebody or they actually focus on doing that work initially. Usually it's inside their head, right? Because they're an entrepreneur, so they created the process probably. And, because of that, they think they're the only one that can do it. Yeah. Or they don't trust anybody else to do it. So what I try to do is get them to extract that information from their head, put it down on paper, put it in some kind of documentation, and then step back and take a look at it and say, okay, am I really the only one that can do this? Probably not.
In other words,
I can probably train somebody to do it.
Yeah, so in other words, getting people from you are the system to you created and documented and built the system.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now, Samantha, you can speak from personal experience. How much of a difference has it made for you in getting up to speed in your position in sales, having that documented system in place that you could learn from?
Yeah, so I think in my personal experience, knowing that there is a set of SOPs at all already helps a lot, so that I know that we are able to hit the ground running. And then getting to know the process, having that to fall back on in case I run into issues is something that helps me gain confidence as I get started in this job and then grow even further into this role.
Yeah. And what you may even find, you may have already found this, Samantha, is that as you go through the process, as it's documented, you start to discover that maybe there's some areas where it needs to be improved and where there's still potential gaps.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, and that happens all the time, and it's normal. So being able to sort of take on ownership of that process is really important, I think. And for Jason, it would be important as a founder to say, hey, Samantha, you take this process, you run with it. And if you see gaps or, inaccuracies or updates in the process that are needed, then, come back to me and let's talk about it and, let's make some updates. Because as a system grows or as a system gets old, it starts to sort of, you start to see holes where there wasn't used to be or where there didn't used to be, right?
Yeah, or is to get people working the system, getting more experienced with it. Because
yeah, and sometimes you can recommend ways of, updating it or modifying it that make it even more efficient.
Yeah, and usually nobody knows where the gaps in a system are better than the people who are working the system every day.
Exactly, yes.
And that could be where a company gets too big for its own good. Yeah, it can run into issues with inefficiencies because you get that kind of too much separation between the people that are setting the policy and the people that are implementing the policy, become too far removed from each other.
Yeah, that's why I always encourage my owner clients to actually, once they've created the formal documentation on a process or an SOP, is then being able to hand that over to someone who can run it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, now another one of the things you mentioned at the start is one of the key things you work on is actually setting goals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that and how that benefits business owners and some tips and tricks you can give them on ways to really use goal setting effectively.
Yeah. So I want to go back. In order to talk about goals, you have to go back and look at the owner strategy, first of all. So out of the strategy comes the goals and the action plans, right? So in order to have effective goals and plans, you have to have good strategy. So I always start with strategy first before I get into goals. It makes more sense to look at whether or not the strategy is effective, first of all. The owner may, I want to say a little story here. I had an owner who was an expert in a woodworking product. That woodworking product was, by the way, was based out of Vancouver, and they had a reputation for creating artisanal wood products. In other words, very specialized, customized wood products. And he wanted to grow his business. He wanted to scale it. So what he did was, without even thinking it through, was he went from a small sort of workshop environment where he had, I think, a half a dozen sort of woodworking experts working on his products. He went from that to a 40,000 square foot manufacturing facility with full assembly lines overnight, like literally overnight. Well, you can imagine what happened. It just, in fact, when I got involved with him, it was his CFO who called me and said, this thing is, it's melting down. We're going crazy, things are breaking everywhere. And so when I got involved with the owner, one of the first things I asked him was, well, what is your strategy behind this? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And he said, well, I want to compete with the big players in this field, like the ones that are, multinationals and that have, and I said, well, okay, hold on a second. If you want to do that, then you've got to create a strategy around how you're going to get there first. So over the course of a year or so, year and a half maybe, I worked with this owner on kind of retracing his steps and going back to strategy, first of all. And once he did that, he realized that if he was going to compete in the market with the big boys, he needed to create an operational system that supported that. So we mapped out some goals over the course of the next 6 months or so after I arrived, where he had a 1 and a 3-year plan. Okay. So the 1-year plan took him month by month, quarter by quarter, step by step through how he was going to improve his operational systems in order to be able to match the strategy that he had. So that meant very practical, very concrete, very actionable steps over the course of that year. And then on the 3-year plan, looking at, okay, once we get to the end of that year, what are the next practical, actionable steps that we need to take in order to get to the point where we can live up to our strategy, basically.
Yeah.
So that's where we started. I want to say this is a cautionary tale because in the end, he just couldn't help himself. He wanted to be out on the floor, so he would end up forgetting about his strategy and forgetting about his goals. And he would go out on the floor randomly and just dive into the production and start messing up the production. So what ended up happening was his staff morale just tanked after a while because he was always messing up the systems that they'd created by stepping in and trying to do it himself. And so in the end, his staff unionized. And that destroyed his operation. And so he had to shut down his operation because he couldn't run with unionization the way he had his setup going. It just wouldn't have worked. So he ended up shutting down completely and moving to the US where he reestablished himself. Anyway, a cautionary tale.
Yeah, hopefully with the learning experience there, he came back and did better next time.
Well, I mean, as far as I know, they're still in business, so they probably did something, different, I'm sure. I kind of lost track of him after a while because I just said, look, I can't help you if you're not going to, do what you say you're going to do, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about the 1-year plan and the 3-year plan. I'm just wondering, why do we decide to set a 3-year plan rather than as opposed to anything longer, like 4 years, or anything shorter, like 2 years? Why is 3-year a good place to fix this time frame?
Yeah, so if you look at kind of a strategic outlook, you tend to look in increments of years as you go out into the future. So the 1-year plan gives you, it's kind of like looking at the weather, right? You know that the weather is going to be predicted more or less accurately within a given time frame, right? If the time frame is close enough to where you're at in the present moment. It's the same with goal planning. So if you plan for like a 5-year horizon, you're really getting out into more of a visioning sort of strategic approach at that point. So I like to think of strategy as more of a 3+ years approach to planning, right? Whereas a 1 and a 3-year plan are kind of near-term and mid-term horizons that you can more or less predict with relative accuracy. The further out you go, obviously, the less accurate will be your predictions. Same like the weather, right? So, we curse the weatherman because they say, well, in the next month, it's going to be, rainy. And then it turns out that it's not,
Yeah.
So the same thing with planning. So I like to box it up that way. it makes it easier to kind of set realistic, practical goals. So SMART goals, right? SMART, the acronym: strategic, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-oriented, right? So that's the way we do goal planning, 1 and through the 3-year horizon. Beyond that, you can set SMART goals if you want, but they've got to be very, very flexible, and really it's more appropriate to talk about strategy at that point and visioning than it is sort of practical goals.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, basically kind of the Cliff's Notes version of that is, the farther into the future you're trying to project, the greater the degree of uncertainty you're going to have to plan around.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah, exactly.
Very precise, let's say if you're doing a daily or a weekly tactical goal, like for example, Samantha, maybe it's like, how many calls do I want to get done this week? You can get very precise with that, because you can very readily predict what's going to be happening over the next week. Just like the weather forecaster is probably going to be very accurate in their forecast over the next 7 days. Like, how often do you see them predict that there's going to be a 60% chance of, or say an 80% chance of rain on, next Saturday, and it's Monday, and it doesn't rain on Saturday, right?
Yeah, and did you know that weathermen, the Weather Bureau, whoever that is, does that percentage calculation not based on actual real percentages? They do it based. That's right. They do it based on the region, right? And if they say, well, there's going to be 100% chance of rain, what they're really saying is there'll be 100% chance of rain within any given area of the region at any one time. That's what they're saying. So it's not actually a real true percentage of rain. So they're hedging their bets, really.
That's what they're saying, that let's say in my example, we're 80% certain that it's going to rain somewhere in the forecast region during the forecast period.
That's exactly right. So
Saturday.
Yeah. So when I talk to owners and founders about their goals, I tell them, look, you can set your goals 6 months out if you want, but chances are your real concrete percentages are going to go way down in terms of your ability to achieve that specific goal. You may hit in certain aspects of that goal, but that goal itself may not even be relevant in 6 months.
Yeah, a good example of that in my own business, it was growth projections that I had back in 2019. Had that shiny new website conversion reports thing going on, and then 2020 happened, and suddenly the entire market that I was selling that system to is just suddenly imploding and all being shut down by order of the government. So obviously they're not going to be investing in their marketing when they're closed.
No.
So that was an unforeseen event that threw my projections completely out the window.
Yeah.
So now I'm pretty much having to start from scratch in a completely different industry that I have little to no experience in working with.
Yeah, that's called a pivot.
And the farther out you go, the more chance there is you're going to have to do a pivot in your strategy.
Yeah, so what I actually do as part of goal planning is I get the owner to do a financial cash flow projection. Well, we'll give them at least 3 scenarios of what their cash flow is going to look like as they go out into the horizon, so that they have those pivot points in their mind already when it comes to finances.
And would you also advise usually having contingency plans of these are things that we predict might?
Well, that's exactly right. So when you talk about a cash flow projection, that's what the engine is that powers those contingencies. So for example, you might have what I would call an optimistic cash flow projection that says you're going to reach a target of, X amount within, that time frame of, 3 months or 4 months or whatever. 3 years. So if that's the case, then you should have a mid-range projection as well, and you should have a pessimistic, what I call a pessimistic forecast as well. So, and then based on those forecasts, those financial cash flow forecasts, you should have a decision contingency plan in place already, ready to go as part of your goal plan. So that if you start to see, as you reach that, 1 year horizon, that 2 year, that 3 year horizon, you start to see where the cash flow is actually going, you can make the pivot sooner and more effectively at that point.
Yeah, as well as have alternate plans in place in case, XYZ happens, out of the blue, then we have this other course of action we can take in response to that.
Well, that's what the pessimistic forecast would hopefully do for you. Yeah. It would give you, if we're not able to make margin, for example, if we don't have a margin at 1 year, what is our pivot? What are we doing, right? So having a plan that's all mapped out for that, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. And so I guess what other of the 5 things you mentioned to start? I know we've covered strategic planning, goal setting.
Yeah, we've covered people. We've covered the mindset. I think the mindset, per my kind of anecdotal story there about my woodworking owner, you've got to, as an owner, be open to the possibility that you might be wrong, that you might not be able to do certain aspects of your job as an owner, and recognizing what aspects those are. So if you, for example, I'll use you as an example, Jason. If you're a technical person and you know that as a solopreneur you need to be more of a business development guy at certain points, then the question is, if those skills are required, what are you doing to either gain those skills yourself, and or what are you doing to fill the gap so that you don't have to do that, or you don't have to worry about that, right? So the same thing with my business, or with my woodworking owner. Back in the day, I really tried to get him to focus on what he did well. And what he did well was he built some of the finest, products of his marketplace. He was known worldwide as a leader and in building what he built. But the problem was that he didn't know how to run a scaled business at the level that he had, sort of jumped into. And so what ended up happening was, and this is the cautionary tale for him as well as for any owner, is he didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to hear that, he couldn't do this at the big boys level, in what he used to say. Yeah. I want to compete with the big boys. And I said, well, you're not a big boy. You're a small boutique, customized business. Like, what's wrong with that? Why not build within that niche? Why do you want to be like a multinational? He said, well, I want to, and so he had it in his mind that somehow he needed to be at that level, and he didn't really understand what it took in order to get there. He thought he knew, right? And he wasn't open to sort of understanding that. So that's the mindset part, really. I can't say enough about that, because most people that I work with, they're already open, right? And business owners that aren't open, they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So it's, it's a very narrow sub niche that I'm going after. I'm going after the owners that know, or at least they have an inkling, or they're open to the idea that maybe they don't know, and they're willing to learn.
In other
right?
words, they're coachable.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And the other thing is on the project management side. Sometimes owners know how to do project management really well. And for those, in your audience that might not know what it is, project management is simply being able to understand, track, and measure how much labor you use, how much cost you use, and how much time you use inside the organization when you do the work of the organization. So the work that's being done inside the organization, whether it's building widgets or providing a certain type of service, your service fulfillment process requires work in order to do that, labor, time, and cost, right? If you lose track of any one of those three things, then you start to bleed money.
Yep.
And so and especially if you're scaling an operation, say you're building a new facility, or you're expanding your offices, or, your footprint is growing somehow, your actual footprint, then what I do is I get them to start using project management tools. In other words, critical path timelines that take them step by step through the process of how they're going to grow that organization. It's the how of what you're doing that is most important in project management. And so
making sure that critical tasks get done on time, on budget, that you have the right people working on the right things at the right times. I mean, with the work I do in web development, it's at least 50% of the work I do is project management.
Yes. Yeah.
Making sure I've got the right people working in the right spots at the right times, that I've got the right budget, and so on.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So that's really about it. I think we've covered off, the business process side. So, there's different levels to business processes. So if you're talking about very high level, then there's probably, I want to say, a maximum of 2 to 3 key core business processes that are critical to the operation of your business. So if you're a manufacturing business, then probably one of the most critical business processes you have is your manufacturing, your actual production of your product. And that process alone needs to be mapped out at a very high level. How you're building your product, what are the steps involved, what's the machinery involved, what are the, again, what is the labor, all that stuff.
Processes,
quality control, everything, yes. So if you have that mapped out, then you're well on your way to understanding your business processes. I was recently working with a client of mine that was in what they call water management. So water management is, it's a whole industry, by the way. And what it is their service was to go into industrial and commercial construction sites and basically set up the systems that delivered fresh water into the construction site and then took away wastewater from that construction site. So it was a two-way sort of systems flow of water.
Yeah.
It's a deal.
Water in, water out.
Exactly.
Now the water out, I guess, would also include runoff water that might pool or collect in the construction site.
Yes, everything that would be considered. Yes, that would be considered
go into the low spots.
Right, that would be considered wastewater. Yes.
Yeah.
So one of their first problems was being able to map out their workflows when it came to their project management, because project management was a big part of what they did. If they went into a commercial site and they had to set up the water management systems, the first thing they needed to do was be able to set up a project so that they could actually accomplish the work, right, on the site. So we spent probably 2 years mapping out everything from their project management to their customer service, to their finances, to their sales, everything, mapping it out on paper, literally. So, and it took 2 years to do that.
Did they expect that it would take 2 years?
No, but I knew better. So I told them in the beginning, I said, it's going to take you a long time to do this properly.
Yeah.
So be ready to go for the long haul. And, you know, they were kind of like, oh, yeah, we can do, I know, you know. And it was because most of it was inside the heads of the people who were actually on the projects doing the work. So, of course, they knew it, but they didn't understand that, you know, putting what they knew in their minds down on paper was going to be such a big deal. Because once you start mapping out business processes, you start to see, as I alluded to you earlier, Samantha, you start to see where the gaps are, where the system isn't working, where the system needs updating or modification, right?
Yeah.
So what's going from someone's mind into an actual piece of paper, you know, they were surprised because they said, oh, I thought that's how it worked. And, you know, what they discovered by mapping it out was, no, that's not how it worked. In reality, this is how it worked.
Yeah, until you write it down, you don't know all the things you're having to ad lib to.
Yeah, and then what they also found. Right, and what they also found was that as a result of mapping it out, they started to see how their system impacted other systems. So now you have like a cross correlation of systems. So for example, the cost side of the business, as opposed to the actual work side of the business, has an overlap, obviously, because it takes money to, you know, do the work. And so, you know, the finance people were sitting there going, well, wait a minute, if that's how that process works, then that's why we're losing money on that.
Yeah.
Right? So it was
help them to understand, well, that's why we need to spend this amount of money on that, because otherwise the people over here can't do the work. And if they can't do the work, then the salespeople can't sell anything because nobody's going to buy. And the whole system collapses.
Well, it wasn't that the system collapses. It just wasn't built properly to handle the volume that they were starting to get into.
Yeah.
And so they all needed to sit down around a table eventually and, you know, compare notes, compare their systems. And so what they found was that it just took a long time to sort of get to the point where they were doing it naturally without thinking about it. Putting it on paper, that is, and then keeping it updated.
Yeah, which could be a challenge, especially when you're dealing with a bunch of busy project managers that are having to write all the stuff down, while at the same time you're still busy working the existing systems, such as it is, to keep, you know, the lights on.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, you know, a lot of these people were out in the field doing the work, and, you know, we're pulling them in and taking them off their job, and they don't understand, you know, the reason why, or, you know, what the importance of it is. But once they all sat around the table and started discovering each other's systems and how they're all interconnected, then they started to see, oh, well, now I know why finance asks me that question every month.
Yeah. Or finances, now I know why they keep asking for money for this every month.
Yeah. So as a result of that, we would build literally parts of the organization around those systems as it grew.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of it too, is just the organizational design of the company itself, of the organization. And so, you know, my expertise, as I said, was in human resources. Part of that expertise was building organizations to expand them. So it was a natural fit for me to be able to help them do that in that case.
Do you think it's related to industrial organizational psychology?
Well, a lot of it would be, especially when you're talking about building organizations around, let me rephrase that. It would be, and it is, when you start to plug in the people as the organization builds. So depending on how you build the organization will then determine what kind of positions you're going to have, what kind of teams you're going to operate, what kind of culture you want. All of those get into organizational psychology, right? So what's best for the business then determines what's best for how the organization is structured, and then that determines what kind of people and how many and who you hire onto the organization so that they fit with the not only how the organization is built, but also how the culture of the organization is starting to, form.
Yeah. Awesome. So do you have any last bits of advice or tips you want to leave people with?
I would say the biggest tip that I can give is the one I started out with, and that is if you are looking at scaling or growing a successful business, in other words, one that's been around for a while, and I would say 5 years plus at least, because statistically, if you can last 5 years, you have another sort of opportunity to last probably another 3 years to the 8-year mark. And once you reach that level, then you probably have another opportunity to last, more than 10 years. Yeah. So if you are, 5 years plus into your business and you want to grow it, or you find that it is growing or scaling, I would really take a look at your mindset in terms of how you see yourself fitting into the business over the long run. What you do want to do is get out of your own way when it comes to the growth of your business as an owner or a founder. You don't want to be the bottleneck. You don't want to be the one that's holding up the process. And, to my story about the woodworking owner, he totally became the bottleneck. And as a result, his business failed. At least it failed in that phase of its growth. So, and it probably cost a lot of money and a lot of pain to have that failure. So my advice is check yourself as an owner if you're growing your business. The second thing is focus on your market, on your target audience, and make sure you got that dialed in. Because if you're going to grow, you better know exactly what your audience, who your audience is, what your market characteristics are, and where you are positioning yourself within that. If you're looking at growing into a mature market, for example, what does that look like over the next 1 and 3 years, and then out onto the strategic horizon? If you're just trying to grow for the sake of growing and you don't have an audience dialed in yet, or you're trying to be all things to all people, then your chances of failure have gone up exponentially.
Yeah, at that point it's time to get that figured out. Is who is your ideal customer? What is your niche?
Yeah.
Because the riches are in the niches.
Yeah. And one of the other thing is, if you're growing then and you've got yourself dialed into the market and you know that you're sort of keeping yourself out of your own way, the next thing is look at your operational dynamics and your operational nuts and bolts of the company. So business processes, people, project management. If you can get that dialed in, get your business processes sorted out and prepared for growth, then you're going to have a much easier time at it and being able to get your people dialed in to right places, right person, right time. So those three things really: mindset, market focus, audience focus, and then operational efficiencies.
All right, awesome. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to, if they have any questions for you, or if they're wanting to explore working with you to get this stuff dialed in their own businesses?
Yeah, reach out to me by email. It's probably the easiest way. Chief Guerilla at Guerilla at let's see, you can use two different emails. Chief Guerilla at guerillacoaching.ca. And that's Guerilla with a Guerrilla. So it's the military style of Guerilla, if you will, not the animal. So Chief Guerilla at guerillacoaching.ca or chiefguerilla@gmail.com. Either one of those will work. I don't know if you have the ability to put that on screen or something, but
yeah, we can put that on screen in the description down below so people can find it.
Also, and my website is the same. It's guerillacoaching.ca.
Yeah, and you're also on LinkedIn as well.
I'm on LinkedIn, Lee Hodgins. Yeah, Guerilla Coaching's on LinkedIn as well. My company. Yeah, so reach out. I'd love to talk. If I do an initial chat with you as an owner or a founder, my goal is to give you something of value that you can walk away with. So I'm usually already in problem-solving mode when I'm talking to someone for the first time, and I'm asking them key questions about mindset, market focus, operational efficiencies.
Awesome. That's great. It's been great having you on here, and
it's been wonderful.
Amazing information there. So I highly recommend people reach out to Lee. Also, if you have any questions or if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in a future episode, be sure to leave those in the comment section down below. Also, make sure to like the video, and depending whether you're on Rumble or YouTube, make sure you give us a follow or subscribe so you can keep up to date on future episodes of the Radiant Business Podcast. I've been your host, Jason Ross, with Samantha Sato and Lee Hodgson, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.
See ya.